Today I built a water stand for my own house and I'm going to show you exactly how I built this. Now this stand, it's not only good for this kind of water system, you can use the same technique for if you want to make a plant stand. And also, even if you don't build anything like it, in this video you will learn how to make repeatable tapers for the legs. You will learn how to do a perfect half lap joint and so many more tips that you could pick up from this video. So I hope you enjoy it and let's get into it. This first section is a voiceover because I forgot to turn on my microphone. I started with milling my lumber. First I have flattened the face of the boards on my jointer, then one edge. Then I took it to the planer and flattened the other face of the board, and then finally took it to the table saw and straightened the last edge. And once my lumber was all milled, I cut it into strips of 2.5 inches wide. The thickness of these boards are about 1 inch and 3/8, and the length that I started with was 47 inches. It's the next day and I'm gonna be honest with you guys. Yesterday I was working on this stand and I got pretty far, but I was making mistakes and I did not like the way it ended up. I'm gonna show you kind of where I went, and today we're gonna build it again a better way. So here is my stand right here. It's not finished, it's just clamped right now. But I don't like the way I cut these angles here. It doesn't hug the bowl. And I feel like that was a mistake. Also, I don't like the tapers starting so tall. So I think I'm going to start the tapers lower down. So let's see. I already milled new lumber. And I cut the legs. So after I mill my lumber, I cut 4 legs. They are 2.5 inches wide. They are, let's see what thickness I ended up after I milled my lumber. They're just about 1 inch and 3/8 on thickness. And also what I did on one end of the foot, I put a 5-degree angle. And that's because the braces that is going to hold the water stand, the ones that goes half lap joint, is going to have a 5-degree angle. And that way our legs will gonna go outwards to give it more stability to the stand. So 5 degrees, I thought about 10 degrees, and I think that's going to be a little bit too much. I don't have that much space in there. I don't want to trip over the legs of the stand. So I think 5 degrees is going to work. So far I only put the 5 degrees on one end of the boards. The boards are not cut to length yet. I need to cut them to 43 inches. So what I did, because I want to make sure they're all exactly the same, otherwise my stand is going to be wobbly. So the best way to cut something to the exact length, like 4 legs, I put a little fence over here on my miter saw and I put a stop block. I did cut this stop block at 5 degrees. So when I bought my 5-degree leg bottom onto that, it just stays flat and it doesn't give me any kind of errors. And then I measure 43 degrees on this end. So from that corner to here, and I put a little mark. And now when I will be cutting this, it will be cut to the 43, and it has an angle here at 5 degrees as well. And because I have that stop block, I should be able to take every one of those legs and just put it there and cut it, and they all should be the same size. Now it's time to cut the tapers. And for the tapers, I decided I'll taper it from 20 inches down. Now down, I want to be left with 1 inch. Maybe I should leave a little bit longer. Let's make it square on the bottom. So if my thickness it's 1 3/8, then I should probably go to 1 3/8 square on the bottom. So I'm going to mark 1 3/8. All right, so I marked 1 3/8. So This is going to be our foot on the bottom. Because it's 1 3/8 thick material, I went 1 3/8 this way, and I put a mark. And then I also put a mark where my 20 inches is, where I wanted to start the taper. So to make the taper, I want to make sure that all 4 legs are exactly the same. So to ensure that, I'm using this jig. This is a piece of plywood that I took a dovetail bit and I put some lines on it. And it has a track, so it rides into my miter slot. And whatever excess material was, I cut it with my blade, so now I have a 0 clearance sled. And what I'm gonna do is I'm going to take the leg and put it here. I put a stop block on the end of my board. I double-sided tape a block here to act as a stop. So I need to make this as repeatable as possible. And then I have this piece here, which it is just a piece of plywood. Let's see, I have another one in here. It's just a piece of plywood that I put a slot in it, and then it has this micro jig pieces that rides into the groove of the dovetail. So I'm gonna use this long one to kind of set the angle so I can make repeatable cuts. So I'm going to put my leg in there, butt against the stop block over here. I hope you can see. I need you to see the whole jig, so I'm gonna maybe do this. So the leg is going to butt right against the stop, and I'm gonna make sure that the 1 3/8 mark, it's right on the edge of my board here. So that's good. And then my 20-inch mark, because that's when I want to start to cut the taper, I'm gonna move it to the edge of the board. So I know that that's where it's gonna meet the blade. So it's looking great right now. And then I'll move this piece of plywood with those stops, and I'm gonna lock it in place, about it right against my stand leg. And make sure nothing shifted. So this is what my jig looks like now. So now I can take every one of those legs and put it right here, and it's gonna cut the same taper on every single one of them. Make sure you cut the taper on the inside of your leg, so the point that is the shortest here goes towards the outside. So let's put this back in here. All right. And I also, it's so close to the blade, I do not want to put my hands in there. Let's raise the blade to the proper height for this. And I'm going to clamp this leg in with some of this micro jig clamps. And that way I don't have to keep my hands close to the blade. So there's one, and I'll put one more up higher. And this is gonna make it for a very safe cut. And my material is held in place. And we should be able to repeat this for all 4 legs. So let's make these cuts. So now we should have 4 identical legs in size with 4 identical tapers. Now I'm going to put the legs aside, and we will work on the cross members. They will be half flap jointed for the part where the pot sits on. So for our cross members, I am going to cut it at I'm gonna overcut it. I'm gonna cut it larger than I need to. And because the diameter of my water stand, it's about, well, the width of it, it's about 9 inches. But because I put a 5-degree angle, the parts, the 3 inches that will stick on the top to hug the bowl is gonna go inwards probably about a 1/2 inch on each side. So a whole inch we will be losing because they will be angled like this. So that means I will need 10 inches. It will be a lot easier for me to make the half flap joint if my ends are flat, because I have to register them against my stop block on my table saw. So what I'll be doing, I'll be cutting this way larger than I needed. So I'll cut it at 12 inches. So I'll cut two pieces that are 12 inches. I'm gonna do the half flap joint in the middle, and then I'm going to cut the angles and the size appropriately afterwards. So, yep, I'm gonna cut two pieces, the same size material as my legs. So I'm gonna cut two 12-inch pieces. So I cut my two pieces at 12 inches, use the stop block on my miter saw, just like when I cut the legs. And then I cut two other pieces of wood from the same plank. These are not the same size, but it doesn't matter. It's the same width and thickness. And I wrote test on them because I'm going to use these pieces to get a perfect half flap joint. So that way I don't test on my real pieces. And I wrote on them so I don't get them confused. To do the half flap joint, let's go to the table saw. So now I took my scrap piece of material, the one that I wrote test on it. I marked where my half of the board is, and I'm going to raise my blade below my mark. I do not want it to be as tall as my mark. So just a little below. And what I will do now is I will run this piece of wood through the blade, and then I will be flipping it over and run it again. And then whatever material I'll have in the middle, I will raise the blade half of that height. And then I'll run it again until I have just a hairline of wood or nothing. I don't want to go too far. And that will determine the correct height of the blade, which is half the height of our material. So I'm going to do that right now. So now that our blade is at the proper height, what we need to do is I marked here, let's say I want to put my half flap joint right there. The first thing you need to do, you need to make one of these pieces of hardwood that is exactly the thickness of your curve. In my case, it's 1/8 inch for this table saw blade. So I made one. The way I made it, I just ran a piece of wood through the blade, and then I cut a thin strip of wood that was thicker than 1/8, and I kept sanding it until it fit perfectly into that curve. So I know it's exactly the size of my curve. So what I'll be doing now is I'll take my piece of, can you see from there? So I'll take my curved piece and I'll place it between my stop block and a piece of wood. And I want to make sure I line this where my first cut is right here at the line where I wanted to start my half flap, and I'll lock and place my stop block. So that's going to be my first cut with the curved piece in between. After I make that cut, I'm going to take away this piece and put my other piece that needs to mate with this piece for the half flap joint. And that's where I'm going to make my second cut. Then I'll take this piece away and I'll nibble away all the material in between the two curves that I just made. So I'll do that, and then I'll repeat the same procedure with this piece of wood, and I'll do the same thing, and then we should have a perfect half flap joint if we did everything correctly. So let's do it, see if it works. All right, you guys, because that worked out on the test pieces really well, I went ahead and I did it on our real pieces. And because I had that stop block, you can see my half lap cut. It's exactly in the same spot. And when I put them together, it is a very snug fit, but they fit pretty much perfectly. So happy with the fit. I think we're good with this. Now we need to go ahead and put our 5-degree on the ends. I have to really pay attention here because one is going to go with the notch up and one is going to go with the notch down. So I want to make sure that my 5 degrees is oriented the right way. So I am going to mark which side is going to be the top of my brace here. So I marked the tops to make sure. That way my 5 degrees is going to go, let's see, I want it to go that way. So, you know, this is exaggerated obviously, but it's going to go like that. So I'm going to have shorter piece on the top, longer piece on the bottom, and I have to mirror that on all the boards. So I'm going to go put that 5-degree angle on all the sides, and then we'll come back and we'll see if the size is appropriate or do we need to shorten these braces. So here is the base, and I cut some scrap pieces of wood that will stick out 3 inches above here, just to kind of simulate to see for size. And this is the base of my water stand. As you can see, way, way, way oversized. So we need to cut it down. So I'm oversized probably by 2 inches. So I'm gonna go cut down from each end equally. Like right now, if we look, we are 11 3/8 and 11 3/8. So I'm going to cut equally from all 4 sides until this part fits snugly in here. What I'm doing, I'm measuring. I'm gonna cut 3/4 of an inch from each end and then check. I don't want to cut too much. So I'm just gonna make some marks to know exactly how far should I cut. Make sure I keep the parts that are labeled top, because you see the notches goes the opposite. And that way I'll cut 3/4 inch from here and here and keep the 5-degree angle. All right, you guys. So what I did, I nibbled away from all 4 sides equally. So now what I'm left with on the top, I have 9 5/8, 9 5/8. And then on the bottom, it is 10 inches and 10 inches. So I know I took equal amount. I measure also from the curve to the edges on both sides, and they're all equal. So now if I put my blocks and I try to put the base of the pot, it's not going to fit. It's going to be short about 1/16. So it's very snug, but my joints are not closing by about 1/16. And I'm going to leave it like that because on the end of these legs that are coming this side, I am going to chamfer the corners. That way the corners won't chip. So we'll be losing a little bit of material as we chamfer those. So I think the size is good. And of course I forgot to press record, but I will show you what I did really quickly. Let me unclamp this. So what I did is I marked 3 inches from the end of my board. Can you see there? I marked 3 inches that is going to stick on the top. And then I measure another 1 1/4, so 4 1/4 all the way from the top, and made another mark. And this is my two legs. The way they will go together is, well, first of all, if I put them together, you'll see the registration marks match, so they are the same on both legs. And then they will go together like this. And I will be fastening these guys with my dominoes. I'll be using this 10 by 50 domino. This is the biggest one my machine will put in. And the rule is usually you wanna, when you do a mortise and tenon, you want it to be about a third of the material size, but this is the biggest one I have, so this will have to do. So we'll join these guys like this with this dominoes, and that's the way we put together these stretchers with the legs. So I'm gonna go ahead and put in my mortises. My domino machine has 3 settings, has a tight, kind of a little bit looser, and an even looser setting. I'm gonna use a little bit looser onto the legs, and then when this stretcher things, I'm going to use the tight setting. That way it will give me a little bit of wiggle room if I need to make adjustments afterwards. So this is kind of the way it would look, and because I did the looser setting in here, you see I can have a few millimeter of wiggle room, so I can make sure I really line everything to my marks and they are where are supposed to be. So this set is ready. Now I'm gonna go do the other set and we'll see you after. It's the next day. My stand is dry from the glue up, and let's put it together, see how it fits, see if the legs are even or it's wobbly, see how we can fix all those problems if we do have them. So I have the 2 pieces, and assembly is really, really easy. Just overlap our half lap joint, and it's a little tight because I made it pretty squeezy, but there you go. It fits perfectly. Now I'm gonna check it to see if the legs are all equal, because I want no wobble in this. For that I need a clamp to clamp this to mimic that it was glued. So I'm going to clamp this just to make sure the joint stays tight, just like if it was glued. And then my flattest surface in my shop, it's my table saw. You know, it is all cast iron, so it's very flat. I'm going to put it on my table saw. It feels very sturdy. Okay, let me bring you in closer. And there is no rock. All 4 legs are equal. They all contact the ground. It's no rocking in there. So we are good with the length of the legs. Now, if your legs were wobbly, if you had some that are longer than others, this will be the time to correct that. And because it's not glued, it's easy to take this whole section on your miter saw and cut a little bit from the end of the leg. I'm going to show you a trick. Let's go to the miter saw. Here is a trick that you can use when you need to sneak up on a cut on the miter saw. Instead of trying to line it up and just take small bites, what you can do is put the blade all the way down, butt the piece against the blade, and then start the machine and lift it up. And because the teeth are flared out just a tiny, tiny little bit from the blade, you will just nibble the smallest little bit, like 1/64 of an inch or something, like really small bites. And that will allow you to sneak up on the cut and get the legs where they are perfectly flat on the ground. Now I'm very happy with the design and I think it looks nice. The one thing that bothers me though is the part that sticks out on the top is too chunky. And I want my stand to be elegant. I want it to, look nice. And also this piece of cherry right here, it had a knot, and I did not notice that until the stand was done and I was sanding it. So what I will do is I will put a taper and cut these corners from the stand. So that way we'll get rid of that knot over there, and also it's going to taper it, make it kind of hug the bowl, and it just looks more elegant altogether. And for that I'll be using the same tapering jig. So it shouldn't be too hard. Let me bring you in closer. Now, just like before, we do have to set it up so we can get the same amount of taper on every single leg. So let's see. I'm going to place it against the stop, maybe to around there. And then where do I want my taper to start? Maybe around there. Now the next thing I'll do is chamfer the bottom of the feet. That way they don't chip and it will protect them. So I'm just using my tiny little plane. You can just use your sander and sand it. And then I'll do the same chamfer on the tops. So I'm gonna do that next. You could just use your sander. It's really easy to put a chamfer. Just, slightly go at 45 degrees and put a tiny chamfer. I chamfered the edges here and at the bottom of the feet. I rounded over a little bit. This is a little bit sharp here. All the edges. Make sure not everything is nice and smooth. All around it, no sharp corners. And my next step is to actually glue the stand together, so these two pieces here. So I'll be gluing that, and then when that is dry, I'll give it the final sanding. I already sand everything to 180, but I'll give it the final sanding to 220, and then we will put the finish on it. Most importantly, let's see if the pot fits on it. The glue has dried, and I did give the whole sand another sanding with 220 grit, and it's ready for finish. For the finish, I'll be using pure tung oil. This is pure tung oil. I mixed it 50-50 with some mineral spirits. Pure tung oil, if it's truly pure, it's usually too thick to apply directly. It won't penetrate the wood as much. And you want to thin it 50-50, that way it will penetrate and protect, and it will be so much easier to work with. So I'll be putting pure tung oil mixed with mineral spirits. I'll be using this white applicator and rub it all over. I will let it sit for 15 minutes or so. I will wipe off all the excess. Then I will let it sit until tonight or, tomorrow sometimes. And I will be finishing it with the carnauba wax. You can purchase this on my website. If you just use the oil, it will protect it enough. It will make it, fairly waterproof and all that. But it will be very, very matte, and I wanted to have that nice, luxurious feel, so a wax will do that. The stand is finished and I really like the way it ended up. I did not put the wax on it yet. The reason why I didn't put the wax on it yet, because I want to give it more time to dry. The tung oil usually takes a really long time to dry. So I'm gonna let it sit for about a week, maybe even give it one more coat of tung oil. And then when I feel like it's pretty dry, I will put the wax on it just to give it that nice sheen. Now I will be taking this inside and putting my water filtration system on just so you guys can see what the heck did we build this for. So I'm gonna put a clip of that in the end of this video. Now I hope this was useful to you and you learned something new. Thank you so much for watching. My name is Skylar Ewing and I'll see you in my next video.